So today, we're going to dive into something really fascinating, a kind of identity crisis that took hold of sociology in India back in the 80s. And we're going to explore it through the work of T.K. Oommen. It's really a story about an entire field of study trying to figure out its own voice, its own purpose, in one of the most complex societies on the planet.
And it all really boils down to this one question. I mean, how does a nation with such unbelievable diversity, such a deep and tangled history, how does it even begin to understand its own social reality? This question right here is the key that's going to unlock this whole story for us. All right, so to really get what Oommen was talking about, we have to start with the problem he was trying to solve. What exactly was this identity crisis? Well, it was a series of deep, pretty troubling questions about the whole point of doing sociology in India in the first place. And it all came down to these big, nagging questions. Was Indian sociology just a carbon copy of Western ideas, a victim of academic colonialism? And why in the world did it seem to be ignoring huge, traumatic national events like the partition? Did it even have the right tools or the right words to describe what was actually happening in Indian society? These weren't just little debates, these were existential questions for the whole field. And look, this wasn't just Oommen's personal opinion. This quote right here is from a formal official review committee. It's basically an indictment saying point blank that the research being done was irrelevant to the country's actual problems. That really gives you a sense of just how serious this whole situation had become. So in the middle of all this confusion, there wasn't just one way of thinking. Oommen identified 5 different, competing schools of thought, and they were all pulling the discipline in totally different directions. Let's meet the 5 key suspects in this intellectual tug-of-war. First up, we've got the traditionalists. For them, all the answers were buried in the past. Their whole thing was that to understand India today, you had to study its unique ancient history and its classical texts, especially the Sanskritic ones. For them, Indology was the only way forward. Then you had the nationalists. They also believed India was special, but their eyes were firmly on the present. Their main mission was to break free from what they called academic colonialism, blindly using Western ideas, and to build a sociology that was truly and uniquely Indian. The nativists took that idea a step further. They basically said truth is local. To really understand how people live, you have to use their own concepts, their own language. Sociology for them had to be built from the ground up, using local ways of seeing the world. And then on the total opposite end of the spectrum were the cosmopolitans. They saw sociology as a universal science. Basically, they were saying, hey, people are people, societies have similar structures, so the same theories and tools should work everywhere, including India. They were searching for those big, general truths about humanity. And last but not least, the radicals. These guys didn't just want to sit back and study society. They wanted to change it. They believed sociologists had a duty to get involved, to intervene, and their approach meant being very selective about outside ideas, especially rejecting those that came from the capitalist West. So you can see the mess, right? You've got these deep divisions, the traditionalists looking way back, the nationalists focused on the nation, nativists on the village, cosmopolitans on the whole world, and the radicals on the future. And their ideas about outside influence were all over the map, from reject everything to embrace everything. It's really no wonder the field was having an identity crisis. But where did all this tension even come from? Well, Oommen digs deeper, and he starts to uncover these historical fault lines that were fueling the whole crisis. And the evidence points to some really fundamental conflicts. One of the biggest fights was between what Oommen called the book view and the field view. Should sociologists be in a library studying ancient texts that describe how society is supposed to be, or should they be out in the villages, observing the messy reality of how people actually live today? It was a real clash between past ideals and present-day facts. But for Oommen, this whole debate was, well, he called it sterile, kind of pointless. He argued that you can't really understand what's actually happening without knowing what people see as the ideal. His solution was so simple and elegant. Let the text teach us about values, and let the field teach us about behavior. You absolutely need both. Oommen also pointed out something really dangerous about that traditionalist approach. By focusing almost exclusively on Sanskritic Hindu texts, sociologists were basically passing off a narrow upper caste Hindu perspective as the perspective of all of India. This completely erased the experiences and histories of the vast majority of people. And this disconnect from reality, it had huge consequences. Oommen points to this absolutely staggering failure of the discipline. It's almost total silence on the partition of India. He argued that sociologists have a duty to see the present as history, to be the ones documenting these major events as they unfold. And on that, they just failed. 9 million. Just let that number sink in. One of the largest, most traumatic human migrations in modern history completely reshaped the nation. And the very people whose job it was to study society were pretty much nowhere to be found. This single number just screams the kind of profound disconnect that Oommen was talking about. Now, on that issue of academic colonialism, Oommen had a really interesting take. He said it's too easy to just point fingers and blame the West. Knowledge, he argued, works like a free market, and a sale can only happen if there are, as he put it, willing buyers in the East. This kind of shifts the focus inward, towards the need to build a more critical, discerning academic culture inside India itself. Okay, so after laying out the whole problem, all the different camps, all the evidence, Oommen doesn't just leave us hanging. He actually proposes a solution, a clear path forward for Indian sociology to find its way back to relevance. And this is so important. The ultimate goal, he says, is not to create some narrow, walled-off academic nationalism. The goal is much, much bigger than that. It's to build a sociology that has a genuine, authentic concern for people and society, all guided by a sense of humanism. He lays out this really clear 4-step plan for what he calls contextualization. Step 1, selective retention. Go through India's past, keep the good stuff, and get rid of the bad. Step 2, informed borrowing. Don't be afraid to adopt good ideas from anywhere in the world. Step 3, judicious mutation. This is the creative part, finding a uniquely Indian way to blend the old with the new. And finally, step 4, facilitate the process. The job of a sociologist is to help understand and guide this whole process of nation building. And, when you zoom out, Oommen's plea for Indian sociology, it really raises a much bigger question for all of us, doesn't it? How can any field of knowledge, anywhere in the world, make sure that it stays connected, that it stays relevant, and that it's actually capable of understanding the complex world it's supposed to be explaining?